Better me.
Better me.
Better me.
Better me.
It's better me. Hopefully.
Hello. Welcome to the pivot episode. I am instantly regretting not taking some anti-anxieties before recording this intro. Usually we do the intro in the studio, but I don't know, I felt weird about doing it there, and I feel anxious even talking about it, and I don't know if my boss is going to be mad at me for talking about it, but the reason I wanted to do this episode is my entire adult life, I have worked at the edge. I started when I was 20, I'm 38 now, and at the start of this year, I thought to myself, I'm done. My show was changing, which was a massive blindside. Like, I just didn't see that coming, and I loved working in the show I was working on, and just like the thought of having to start another new show was just mentally too much for me. I just felt tired, and I know that my job is a privilege, and so I don't ever want to take it for granted. And I felt like I would be taking up a seat of somebody else's dream when my heart wasn't really in it anymore. And I want to make it very clear that Nixon, who I was doing the show with, was going back to my FM, and Steph and I were going to stay at the Edge, and it's nothing, like, I have zero beef with Nixon. This was nothing to do with him and all to do with me. And it was just, can I be bothered? Do I still love this? And I was sitting at home with Bryce, and we worked out a budget of if I walked away. I had spoken to mentors and my parents and my family, and everyone kind of seemed to be in agreement that maybe it was time to pivot and do something else. I was 99.9% quitting my job, and I felt fine about it. I don't know, for the first time I felt really crystal about it. I was like, no, like, I'm done. And then I was kind of trying to warn Steph, my co-host, that I was going to resign the next day. And I said to her, look, I think I'm going to resign, but I want you to know that because she was pregnant, that I would not make any moves until she'd had her mat leave, and I wanted to make her have the best mat leave ever. And Steph looked at me and she said, look, if you want to leave, like, I'm not going to stop you. I love you. But if you want me to have the best mat leave ever, it would be great if you could just give it a go and let's do this together, and you're not doing it on your own. And this is like, we've got this, like, let's just try. And if you try and you don't like it and you walk away, then at least you know you tried. You haven't just given up and gone through your career then given up. And my husband said the same thing. And so even though I was 99.9% fully content, happy with my decision, because of what Steph said, my decision changed and I stayed. And I'm glad that I did. But I am also really aware that I'm 38 and I work on a radio station that's targeted at, you know, young, cool people. And no one wants to hear some old-ass 40-year-old telling them about TikTok, you know? So I'm aware that my time is coming, that I need to move on to somewhere else. Pivoting sounds scary, and I don't know how to pivot, and there's just so many questions. So that is the reason for this episode, to talk about what the hell is pivoting within your career? How do you do it gracefully? How is it once you get to the other side? And what are the key things that we need to do to make sure that we're okay through the pivoting process? And I've got 3 women that have pivoted.
As soon as you realise that actually no one gives a shit, you know, no one gives a shit about what you're doing, really. Like, you have to take that stuff away because, you know, ultimately it's about what you're going towards is making you much happier and, you know, a better me.
I reckon let's get into it, because I hope that it gives you the same amount of inspiration and wrapped upness that it gave me.
Better Me, hopefully, with Sharyn Casey.
I think that you can be a better person when you're actually doing work that you enjoy, and there's so many times in our lives where we don't have the luxury to be able to just like quit our job and be like, F you all, and then be like, oh God, what do I do now? Kind of like, and actually I think the first time I ever heard the word was from one of my guests that I'm about to speak to, was the word pivot, and saying, if it doesn't work out, you got to pivot. And I was like, I've never heard that before. And I've had so many conversations, especially with women that are in lines of work that makes them miserable, or they're just over it, or they're uninspired, but they're too scared to pivot. And that's why I wanted to do this episode. And when I started thinking about who I would speak to, there was 3 women that I think are just incredible, and my whole career I've kind of known about them within like the media space and all that sort of stuff, and all 3 of them were kind of the person at particular companies, and then they left and it was doing their own thing. They pivoted, and I can imagine that it would have been really scary, but they have done that and they've worked their asses off, and I think that they are the perfect people to talk to. So I would like to introduce my 3 guests today. Please welcome Tatum Savage.
Hi.
Emma Mulligan.
Hello.
And Jade Hurst. Yay! I'm going to go through each of you now. If you could give me like a quick rundown for like the podcast listeners of what you were doing and where you pivoted to. So Tatum, I'll start with you.
My situation is probably a little bit different, but I was at Mac for 11 years, the best bloody place. I mean, I really found myself there. Incredible leadership teams, incredible place to work. I didn't choose to leave. That choice was made for me, and it was a very hard one for me to, I really suffered through grief, I suppose, in terms of leaving that job. But for about 5 years before I did leave, I had always wanted to do my own thing. But because there was just so much great stuff happening at Mac, I just never had I was just like, I can't leave. This is happening. We've got this collab. We've got this special guest, whatever. And then I left, and I'd set up Savage Society, and I was like, do you know what? This is like the universe telling me that this is what I'm supposed to do, but I just didn't have the courage to do it. And I've never looked back, and I'm so grateful for all of those years, because it taught me so many incredible, how I would like to run a business and how I want to treat people, because they just had such incredible work culture and etc.
So your agency now, what sort of stuff are you doing there?
So Savage Society is like PR, brand, creative direction. I'm flexing. My job at Mac was so broad that I just picked up so many skills, and so it's fashion, beauty, lifestyle brands. My whole journey through leaving Mac to today has probably been 5 years, and I've learnt a lot about myself during that journey with incredible clients that, it's more than just this is the work, tick. It's like they've become part of my fray, I suppose, and that was the beauty of Mac, is that we were such a family unit, and the people that we worked with, including you, I mean, we worked together for so long. It wasn't like, oh, Sharyn Casey from MediaWorks. It's like you were part of the Mac family.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I try to operate my business now.
Oh, this is a good moment, actually, because Jesse Laughton from Robert Walters Recruitment Agency, he's got such a great perspective of the job market at the moment because he's in it. So, Jesse, how tough is the job market right now?
I work mostly in the public sector, being based in Wellington, and I think we're all kind of over the public sector cuts that have been in the media, and it's quite tough out there, especially for some people who have been somewhat stable or in similar positions for a long period of time.
And so for people like Tatum that we're also speaking to in the podcast, it wasn't her choice to pivot. She was made redundant. So what would you say to somebody like that if they turned up to see you? What would your advice be?
I guess there's a couple of ways to look at it. One would be, do you have the luxury of looking in the same market or the same kind of roles? And if they're out there, especially if you're not wanting to pivot, right? Like if you want to stay in the kind of same skill set and scope that you've been doing. And if that is the case, then looking at those organisations, getting to know what they're looking for outside of a job description or KPIs, because it is a super competitive market. So the likelihood is if you're lucky enough to get an interview, you'll be up against as equally technically capable people. And so it's like, well, what's the point of difference? Why should a hiring manager entertain you as their next employee over somebody else? So yeah, I think it's a bit of self-awareness, knowing what you bring to the table, and getting really, really good at selling your story, So who are you outside of what you've just done? Because those are the things that'll be the differences in being successful, I reckon.
So Better Me, hopefully, is brought to you by Specsavers. Absolute legends. And I wanted to go in, get my eyes tested, and kind of find out, what Specsavers are all about. Because if you're going to work with someone, then you want to know what they're all about, I had the OCT test.
I'm just lining you up at the moment. Are you still comfortable at this height?
Sure am.
Excellent. And just looking at the green X now.
Carthigan, the wonderful optometrist here. What was actually happening when I was getting that OCT test? Because it was so fast and so easy.
Yeah, it's the machine does everything on its own, which is really remarkable. You just need someone to monitor. But it's taking a photo of the back of the eye. It's mapping your nerve layer at the back of the eye to pick up eye health conditions. It's also giving us an actual cross-section of the back of the eye. And telling us if there's anything in the layers, in different layers. It diagnoses everything from diabetic problems to molds, and it's pretty remarkable. So it's a very, very useful piece of tech. Every store in New Zealand has one, and every person gets the OCT. So it just means that we pick up a lot of things that we didn't used to.
Incredible. So make sure you do come in and get one of those. It was actually very fun. I felt like I was the Terminator when I was getting it done. It was very fun. I highly recommend. So get into Specsavers and give that a go.
Better Me, hopefully, with Sharyn Casey.
Going to go back to Tatum now to hear more of her lived experience.
What would your advice to people listening right now that are maybe going through that and have no hope of what they're going to do next?
I would say that it's going to be the best thing that's happened to you. Like, I know it's hard right now and you just can't really see how your life is going to improve, but it really is the best thing that is going to happen to you, and you'll look back and be grateful. But take everything that you've learnt from that tenure, from wherever you've been, take all of that good and invest it into your next step.
For Mrs. Emma Mulligan, like Tatum with Mac, you were like that with Puma. You were like Emma from Puma.
Yeah, so I was 16 years at Puma, and I guess for me, like Tatum, I loved it. It was part of my identity. I was no longer Emma Phillips. I was, Emma from Puma. A lot of people joked my surname was from Puma.
Yeah.
And I sort of had been there for about 8-9 years, and I remember talking to the then GM and was like, I am marketing manager for New Zealand, but I want to be like the head of marketing for Australasia. That's my goal. And they were like, they're never going to give it to someone based in New Zealand. You're never going to get it. And I was like, fuck you. I'm going to get it. And that was my goal. And 4 years later, I achieved it. I became head of marketing for Australasia, and I sat on the board. I was leadership. And I think for me, it was like a culmination of it. I've achieved all my goals. The money was sensational. I had a very young family at the time. I was newly married. And I thought, this is it, this is the pinnacle. And it was a lot of things for me. I spent 2 years, there was a change at the helm. I'd always bled for Puma, and I felt like Puma had bled for me. In those last 2 years, there was a change at the helm and a realisation that potentially it was a little bit of a one-way street.
Yeah.
And like Tatum, I didn't know what to do because I was where I wanted to be, and it was amazing, and I loved it, and I loved the people I got to work with. But I also wasn't doing what I loved anymore. I think when you get to that level, I wasn't actually doing marketing anymore. I was doing spreadsheets and strategies and sitting in meetings of, redundancies, and, it was just, I wasn't doing what I thought the job entailed anymore. Just made me realise that, gosh, I'm on a hamster wheel here, and I'm just going round and round and round, and I'm not making any difference anymore. I'm just doing things because that's what we're being told to do, and I'm a box ticker.
What was the feeling like for you, and how do you kind of process it to no longer be with a brand that is your identity? Because that's something I think about, where I'm like, who am I without the edge? Like my entire
So true.
like 20 years old I started The Edge. I'm 38 now. Like my entire adult life has been in this box.
I think you've got to back yourself and you've got to know who you are. And it is wonderful in those worlds because like Tatum was at Mac and I was at Puma and Jade had been at Red Bull and we had 3 brands at the time that were very desirable.
Yeah.
And you do get swept up in they like me, they want to be with me. When they don't, they just want the brand. And it was when I left that I actually realised that, you know, I have this life outside of the from Puma. Mm-hmm. And I can actually just be Emma and I can actually do this and I am talented and it's not, that doesn't define me.
Yeah.
So now you are like running your own business. So
I have a business partner who I knew through Puma. His name is Lex and he was the CMO of Burger Fuel. I had this idea for society which was very focused on small businesses that don't have internal marketing departments, do what they do really well but just don't have the fundamentals or finance to hire someone full time, and we could just come in and help them. And I'd heard that Burger Fuel's marketing girl was going on maternity leave, so I rang Lex and was like, hey, you know, I've just got this idea and you could be my first, like I hate the word client, but you could be my first like collaborator. And Lex was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting timing, let's meet up. So we went and had lunch and I sort of told him my idea for society and I left that lunch meeting with a business partner.
Incredible.
Which I never thought that I would ever get because Lex was like us. He was a stalwart. He'd been with Red Bull when it first came to New Zealand. He'd gone on to be the CMO of Burger Fuel for forever. And he was Lex from Burger Fuel.
Yeah.
So it was, that was kind of where I came in. And so I'm not a solo owner-operator like Tatum and Jade. I'm very lucky that I have a person whose strengths are my weaknesses and my strengths are his weaknesses. You've got to be hands-on, and that was one of the reasons that I struggled a little bit towards the end at Puma was I wasn't actually, as inane as it sounds like, I wasn't hanging a poster in a store. I wasn't going to visit.
We're being creative.
You know, I wasn't doing it. And I was stuck behind a desk and I was looking at spreadsheets and, you know, the insights into the business were incredible and I learned a lot, but I wasn't doing what I loved to do and what I was good at.
Jade, moving into your story, I remember you used to own Raw, which was a PR company. You were one of the first to actually go out and do it yourself away from like a big company. So tell us the story because since then you've pivoted completely different direction from having this big company.
That's right. Yeah.
So give us the rundown, Jade.
Well, there's been a couple of pivots in my career so far. So leaving Red Bull, I remember at the time just this conversation people used to have with me like, oh my God, it's so brave leaving your job, you know, of 6 years. And I loved Red Bull. I learnt so much and it really was my identity as well, you know, mirroring what you guys have said. And as soon as you realise that actually no one gives a shit. You know, no one gives a shit about what you're doing, really. Like, you have to take that stuff away because, you know, ultimately it's about what you're going towards is making you much happier and, you know, a better me. Honestly, I would have been braver to stay in that job because I got to the point where I'd done everything that I wanted to do as well. You know, I just nodding along with everything that you guys are saying just feels quite familiar in that I wasn't doing what I wanted to anymore. I very early on knew I wanted to work for myself, and I got to the point where I wasn't working with the people and the collaborating with other brands that I wanted to, and I wanted to be in control of that. So really the only person that's going to make that happen is me. So brave as it was, I look back and I guess yes, because actually I handed in my notice at Red Bull and that was right before the GFC of our careers. And I was like, oh shit. You know, like I'm going into this world. Yeah, and I have absolutely no idea if anybody is going to need me. Yeah. I have a hunch, you know, but it ended up being the best thing that I ever did because businesses needed people like me focused on marketing and comms and really, really early influencer work.
You guys were the OGs. Yeah. You guys were like getting people to do shout-outs on Twitter.
So, yeah, listen, to be honest, Absolutely, it was such a positive move for me, but it was not easy. I had to really shake this identity crisis as well, and we haven't said it yet, but I want to talk about it, the imposter syndrome that you get from moving into something else. And I had to overcome that more so in my current business that I have now, Good Space. So I pivoted completely out of marketing, brand, PR and influencer work, and I had to completely retrain and started a new business like 5 years ago now, and it's the best thing I ever did.
And for people that don't know and haven't seen you on the telly, you have pivoted from owning a publicity, PR and communications company to now doing...
Yeah, so I retrained, and now for commercial and residential projects, I do wellness interiors. So I specialise in creating healthy indoor environments for people in workplaces and in homes. And so it's really creative, but it's also super technical and
different.
I love it. It's super fulfilling.
It's time to put the questions back to Jessie from Robert Walters Recruitment Agency. So Jessie, when you're out in the job market, is having been with the same company for such a long time, is that a good thing or a bad thing for people? And how do you position yourself as a candidate to be as attractive as possible?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think with a lot of these, it kind of depends, right? So are you looking to go to another organisation that would kind of value that retention and tenure? Look, there are some types of roles or types of work where you're not really wanting people to progress and change in terms of what their scope is within an organisation. You just need someone who's really good at the thing to do that thing for a long period of time. And so if that's the organisation kind of you're barking up, then fantastic. That's definitely seen as a strength. I guess if you're going to another organisation which doesn't have a culture of keeping people around for 12, 15 years, and maybe it's a bit cyclic like the public sector tends to be at times, you're going, okay, you spent 10 years at insert organisation here. How did you promote yourself or how did you advance in your career internally? So when you started that job a decade ago versus to now, what's that journey been? What is your scope of responsibility? Has it changed? Has it developed? How have you grown within an organisation? It's really important to pull that story apart when, I guess, speaking to interviewers regarding roles.
And what would your advice be to anyone that has been, in a job or an industry for a really, really long time, and you just start to fall out of love with it? Like, how do you navigate that? Or you want to have a pivot and do something else, but you're not quite sure what that other thing is. What would your advice be to those people?
I think this idea that we have to be passionate about everything we do is a little bit of an oversight in this current market. A lot of the time we don't know what we're passionate about, and most of the time we actually discover that, right? So we go into the unknown, and through that experience we find something that really kind of clicks with our psyche, so to speak. And personally, I can kind of attest to that. I was in the fitness industry for 12, 13 years, and it was definitely a passion project. And coming over to recruitment, it wasn't, it's not like as a kid I wanted to put people in the right jobs. That was never a goal. But what I acknowledged was my ability to kind of coach and motivationally interview people. Those were skill sets that were transferable into recruitment, and I like winning, and I like doing well. And so instead of passion leading that decision, it was around, well, what skill sets are genuinely transferable, and how could I win at something else? And if I discover a passion throughout that process, then fantastic. But I don't know, you don't have to be passionate about everything you do. You may get your passion, or you might fill your emotional cup from things outside of work, family, friends, social lives. And for a lot of people in the market at the moment, it's about where can I be useful, not necessarily where can I be passionate.
Oh, okay. So for anyone that is listening right now that wants to take the leap, they want to pivot, we're going to go back to Tatum now, who has been through this already, to find out what she would say to somebody that was going through the same thing.
Don't worry about what you've, been told or what society has kind of made you believe to be, how you need to live your life. It's just what makes you happy. Because the thing is that those corporate salaries, those corporate hours, they're good, but But
miss that salary.
I think I'm happier.
Oh, 100%.
You know, I'm
100%.
happier without that, to be honest.
Money's not everything, and I know that's hard in this situation,
Yeah.
but yeah, with that level, you know.
Yeah. That's a really common theme, I feel like, in every episode of this podcast is it always comes back to you have to advocate for yourself. Or
No one else is going to do it.
No one
We're
else
in
can do
charge
it.
of you.
Honestly, so great. And I'm so grateful for your time because I know how busy all three of you are. And I just think you're brilliant. And I think that it's not often that you get told that you're doing a good job, especially when you're the boss, like you three amazing women are. But you guys are doing such a great job. There's heaps of everyday awesome women out there that are inspiring so many people without even knowing it, that deserve to have a big black microphone in their face. And you three are definitely the sort of people that other people need to be inspired by, because I know that you inspire me. So thank you so much. It's a real privilege to have you on the podcast. So thank you very much.
Oh, we're
Thank you
so
very
privileged. Thank you.
Thank you. Could have talked for hours, I reckon.
This was fun.
Well, you're free now, so thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my God, I could have spoken to those wahine toa forever. Now, on the next episode, we are going to talk about the thing that started it all. We're going to be talking to my friend Dr. Sash and also naturopath Jess Blair. We're going to be talking about this because I saw a naturopath and I was getting scammed.
If you're in distress and you want to be healthy and well, it usually comes from within, and anything that a doctor or whoever can do is to support that journey.
We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening. We honestly really do appreciate it. Have a great week. Ta-ta!